The clerk looked at my driver's license, looked back at her screen, and used the same calm voice people use when a form is missing one signature. Mrs. Lane, our system shows your marriage to Colin Pierce was dissolved almost 3 months ago. I sat there with my purse on my lap, my wedding ring still on my finger, and for a second I thought grief was playing tricks on me. I had come to the county office to update signing authority after my father's death. Not to be told my husband had erased me from a marriage he still came home to every night. Allison Price, the attorney helping with my father's estate paperwork, stopped moving before I did. The clerk turned the monitor slightly, and there it was. A decree, a waiver, a settlement agreement, and my name printed across pages I had never knowingly read. My signature sat at the bottom, soft at the first stroke and lifted at the end. Exactly how I signed contracts when Colin said, "Just the insurance updates. Bridge. Before Friday." The proof did not look dramatic, and that made it worse, because ordinary paper had done what no shouting match ever had. I pulled out my phone with hands that felt steady and saw a text from Colin waiting on the screen. "Don't forget to eat something today." I stared at those words until they stopped looking kind and started looking practiced. Like the voice of a man who could remind me about lunch while a courthouse record said I was no longer his wife. My throat tightened, but every question I wanted to scream had already been answered by the address listed for notices. They had gone to our company office, not our home. Allison reached for the file before I could touch it again and kept her voice low. "We need certified copies of everything. And you are not calling him from this room." I looked at her, then at my ring, then at the clerk, and whispered, "So if I am divorced, why did he sleep beside me last night?" Before Colin became the man with a courthouse secret, he was the man beside me in a hotel kitchen at midnight, begging a line cook not to quit before dessert. We built Lane Pierce hospitality out of borrowed vans, late vendor calls, burned appetizers, and apology notes slipped under ballroom doors after something went wrong. Colin could walk into a tense meeting and make a hotel manager breathe again, while I handled staffing, contracts, invoices, kitchen schedules, and every small fire no client saw. When he squeezed my hand under a conference table and whispered, "We made it through worse," I believed the "we" more than the words. The distance did not arrive like a slammed door. It came in 2 bites of dinner left on a plate, a jacket smelling like restaurant smoke, and texts saying a client needed him after I had set the table. Denise Pierce noticed what she wanted to notice, which meant she saw my empty nursery more clearly than her son's empty chair. "You work so hard, sweetheart, but a house still needs a child's voice," she would murmur, while Colin stared into his glass like the silence had nothing to do with him. I kept telling myself pressure changed people, and every cold night had a practical explanation if I loved him enough to accept it. Maren Cole entered my life through a story ordinary enough to trust. After a hotel blamed her for a catering mess and left her with red eyes and references, I introduced her to private clients, showed her how to write a clean service proposal, and lent her my black dress for an interview because she wanted one chance to look like she belonged. Colin met her when I asked him to coach her through difficult client calls, and he smiled at her notes, then said, "Let me see how she handles a VIP table." That sentence should have stayed small. Instead, Maren kept the dress too long. Her thank you texts grew sweeter than the favor deserved, and Colin started knowing her schedule before I did. I noticed, then explained it away, because nothing looked ugly enough yet to call by its real name. By the time it did, the paperwork had already been signed. Allison did not let me drive home with panic sitting in my chest. She took me back to her office, laid the certified copies across her desk, and pointed to the part that mattered most. The notices had gone to Lane Pierce Hospitality, not our house, which meant Colin had built the divorce around the one place he knew I trusted routine more than suspicion. I remembered him sliding a stack of insurance renewals across our kitchen island while my father was dying, tapping the yellow tabs with his finger and saying, "Just these spots. Bridge. Nothing dramatic." Allison kept her voice low because she knew one loud sentence could make me break. No confrontation. No warning him. No angry text, she said. And I nodded while staring at my own signature on a waiver I never meant to sign. She told me to save emails, calendar entries, delivery logs, and every message from that week, then handed me Grant Pike's number like she was passing me a railing in a dark stairwell. Grant was an old college friend who handled internal investigations legally, and when I called from the parking garage, he did not waste time comforting me. "Send what you have, and I will stay inside the law." By the next evening, Grant found the first clean crack in Colin's story. Colin was not in Duluth meeting a hotel client, even though his calendar said he was. And he was not stuck late with a nervous banquet manager. He was walking into a serviced apartment building in St. Mather. Paul with groceries in one hand while a little boy ran toward him from the lobby. Marin Cole stood behind that child wearing the calm smile she used when she thanked me for helping her rebuild after losing her hotel job. Grant's voice came through carefully, like even facts could bruise if spoken too fast. "I cannot tell you what this means yet, but the front desk knows him, and he has been there often enough for that to matter." I parked across from the building and watched Colin bend down to fix the boy's collar, while Marin brushed rain from his sleeve like she had done it 100 times. Nothing looked secret, and that was what hollowed me out, because affairs were supposed to hide, but this looked practiced. I waited until Colin came home, set Grant's photos on the dining table, and watched his face lose color before his mouth found a defense. "You hired someone to follow me," he said, as if the problem was the proof and not the apartment. The woman, or the child reaching for his hand. I looked at the picture where Marin stood close enough to belong and kept my voice low. "You have been divorced from me for 3 months, living with her part of the week, and still coming home to ask what I made for dinner." Colin sat down slowly, no longer pretending confusion. "We were over before the papers. Bridge. And you know that," he murmured, leaning on words he had polished for himself. "Marin makes me feel wanted. Mom finally has a grandchild to love. And you turned our house into work. Grief. And silence." I felt the sentence land where he aimed it, but the decree in my bag kept me upright. "You hid divorce papers inside business forms while my father was dying," I answered, and his silence told me more than denial. Then his tone changed, and the husband disappeared under the operator I had mistaken for a partner. "If you make this ugly, hotels will hear ugly, clients will get nervous, and every contract with my name on it will start shaking," he said, tapping the table. He reminded me he held customer history, banquet contacts, approval emails, and enough internal notes to make my judgment look careless if arranged right. That was when I understood the affair was not the weapon he feared losing. It was the excuse he planned to use while cutting my hands off the company. I lowered my eyes because he needed to believe fear had finally done what love never could. "Give me time," I whispered, and Colin exhaled like a generous man granting mercy. Upstairs, I turned on the shower, called Allison, and listened to my own voice stay calm while I told her he had threatened the business. "Did you record him?" she asked, and I looked at the spare phone glowing on the counter before I answered. "Yes." The next morning, I asked Erin Walsh to close my office door before she sat down. Erin was not my friend in the way people use that word at parties, but she had kept our books clean through late invoices and clients who treated payment terms like suggestions. I slid a list of vendor names toward her and kept my voice even. "I need every charge tied to mobile kitchen equipment, cold storage, delivery overflow, and event staffing under Colin's approval." Erin looked at the list, then at me, and understood enough not to ask the wrong question. By noon, She came back with her laptop against her chest, her face pale in a way numbers alone could not explain. "These vendors look real until you try to find where the work happened," she murmured, opening invoices that all used the same clean language. No signed delivery sheets. No hotel receiving stamps. No driver logs. Just Colin's approval, and descriptions so smooth they felt scrubbed. One name made my stomach drop. Cole Event Support had billed us for emergency coordination on nights Marin's apartment records showed deposits and service fees. And Aaron had matched the payment dates without knowing why they mattered. Colin had not only given another woman his time, he had let company money move toward the life he was building away from me. That evening, I came home to Denise's coat by the door and Marin standing in my kitchen with my father's blue Dutch oven on the stove. The smell of chicken and rosemary filled the room like an insult dressed as dinner. Denise looked up from the table and smiled too gently. Marin's heat went out. "Bridge. And this is only for a few days." Colin watched me from beside the counter, waiting for the scene he could use later. Marin lowered her eyes and whispered, "I never wanted to make this harder for you." I looked at the pot my father bought me and understood what she had chosen to touch. I went upstairs, sent Allison the time they entered my house, and locked my office door before my hands finally shook. By morning, the house was quiet again. But the damage had followed me to work before I even touched my office door. One of our prep cooks stood near the receiving entrance with her phone lowered, pretending she had not just watched something she wished she had missed. Outside the kitchen bay, Marin stood beside her mother, Linda Cole. While delivery drivers slowed their carts and employees glanced through the glass, Linda's voice carried clean through the hallway. "My daughter is being pushed out by a woman with money, and all she wants is for her child to have his father." Marin held herself like someone trying not to collapse, which would have worked better if I had not watched her cook in my kitchen the night before. She looked toward the building and murmured into her phone that she never wanted trouble. Only peace. Only a safe place for her little boy. Only fairness from people who had everything. I did not step outside, because Colin wanted one bad image of me more than he wanted the truth. I called security, then Allison, and kept my voice even while my pulse beat hard enough to hurt. The first hotel called before lunch. Their coordinator sounded embarrassed, but not embarrassed enough to avoid the question. "Bridget, is there any personal situation that could affect our winter events with your company?" I looked through my office glass at staff moving slower than usual, everyone trying to work around a rumor standing near the loading dock. I told her our operations were stable. All inquiries would go through counsel, and every event on contract remained fully staffed. Grant sent the missing piece an hour later. Colin had texted Marin the night before, saying if I lost my temper in front of employees, clients would finally see who he had been dealing with. That sentence did more than hurt. It explained the timing, the place, the phone in Linda's hand, and Marin's careful tears outside the one entrance vendors used. I forwarded everything to Allison and asked Aaron to freeze Colin's vendor approvals under routine compliance review. No one needed the whole story yet. They only needed clean rules, locked records, and one person calm enough not to hand Colin the scene he had ordered. Grant found the next piece in a place Colin never thought to fear, because it did not come from me. It came from a man named Brent Maddox, a restaurant equipment salesman who had once believed Marin's story long enough to help her, then kept every message when the story changed. Grant did not dress it up when he called. "Bridget, this is not about shaming a child, but Marin has used uncertainty before, and she knew exactly how to make men pay for the version that protected her." Allison reviewed Brent's messages and told me to keep my anger away from the child and pointed at the pattern instead. The money requests, the emotional pressure, the dates, the careful way Marin never gave a clean answer when someone asked for proof. That same night, Colin asked me to come to Denise's house for dinner, saying we all needed to speak like adults. I almost laughed at that, because adults were apparently people who hid court papers, moved women into kitchens, and called it peace. Denise had set the table like a family announcement deserved real plates. Colin sat beside Marin, calm enough to look rehearsed. While Denise spoke about dignity and how some women had to accept when a home had changed shape, Marin kept one hand in her lap and looked tired in the soft, wounded way she wore whenever a room might feel sorry for her. I waited until Colin said, "We can end this without making everyone suffer," then looked straight at him and answered, "Are you sure the life you are protecting is even true?" The room tightened before anyone moved. Allison arrived with a sealed envelope. Not loud, not dramatic, just official enough to make Marin stand too fast and whisper that she needed air. Colin followed her onto Denise's porch, and the doorbell recorder caught what the dinner table did not. Marin's voice cracked as she told him, "You promised me blood would not matter if it ever came up." And Colin went so still I could see the truth reach him before any paper did. I did not have to explain the whole thing to Denise. Her own porch had done that for me. Colin came back inside with his face emptied out. And for once, the man who always had the next sentence had nothing ready. The meeting that ended Colin's control did not happen in court. It happened in the small conference room above our prep kitchen, with Aaron on my left, Allison beside the door, 2 hotel clients across from me, and Colin sitting like he still owned the room. I called it an operations assurance meeting. Because clients did not need drama, they needed to know their winter events would be staffed and delivered. Colin arrived calm until Aaron opened the vendor folder and placed unsigned delivery sheets beside his approval emails. His voice stayed smooth at first. Bridget ran operations, he reminded everyone. So if paperwork looked loose, that was her lane. Aaron did not flinch as she slid over invoices with no receiving stamps, duplicate vendor addresses, and the payment trail tied to Cole event support. Allison added the certified divorce file, the notice address at our company, and the recording where Colin warned me hotel contracts would shake if I did not stay quiet. The room did not explode, and Colin had never prepared for that. No one yelled. No one cried. No one gave him a scandal to hide behind. One client closed her folder and looked at him like she had smelled spoiled cream under a silver lid. "Until this is resolved," she said, "Bridget signs for us, or we pause everything." By late afternoon, Colin's access to client accounts, vendor approvals, spending cards, and contract email had been suspended. An outside auditor took Aaron's files, and Allison filed to reopen the divorce record based on fraud and misrepresentation. Marin stopped getting freelance calls after clients learned she had dragged a family fight to a workplace and filmed it near a loading bay. Linda Cole received a cease and desist, and Denise Pierce stopped calling me anything at all. Colin came to my porch 3 weeks later, looking older in a coat I used to remind him to dry clean. "Marin lied to me too. Bridge," he murmured, as if being fooled after fooling me made us even. I stood behind the locked screen door and felt no rush of victory, only quiet space where pain stopped, begging to be explained. "You were deceived after you deceived me," I answered, and he looked down because the sentence left him nowhere clean to stand. "I sold that house before spring." Lane Pierce Hospitality became Lane Hospitality, smaller for a while, steadier after the rot was cut out, and mine where it mattered. Months later, Grant brought sourdough to my townhouse near the lake and asked if I needed help putting up shelves. I said yes, not because I needed saving, but because peace finally learned to knock before entering. If this story felt familiar, remember this: rebuilding does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like signed papers, locked doors, clean kitchens, and one calm morning where nobody lies beside you. I hope you find a life gentle enough to breathe in, strong enough to keep your name safe.